been my way of life. Pretty much every decision I made every day, all of the time, was determined by how it would be perceived by others. Since my diagnosis, probably the biggest challenge has been to let go of the masking and the people pleasing. I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt that I was struggling to deal with. If that's the way you are, you're not placing any worth on yourself.
Welcome everyone. Mark Dixon, father and husband, found out at age 50 that he's autistic, and we get to hear all about that recent diagnosis.
Mark, you look wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I don't know that I agree, but thank you.
Well, welcome. We talked about so many things, and from your application, we didn't even talk about everything. So do you have a sense of where you would like to begin?
Oh, wow. Look, who knows? There's so much, as you said, there's just so much. I suppose why I was interested in talking is that I really am right in the messy bit at the moment and it's a protracted period of time. So yeah, I'm just quite interested in sort of sharing that. So, it's out there for people to engage with, which however works for them. So yeah, just whatever messiness comes around. But I suppose where I'm at is a couple of years ago, I got diagnosed with ADHD. They call it combined type, so inattentive and hyperactive. And more recently, I started seeing a really neuroaffirming psychologist. And within a couple of sessions, she said, "Oh, I think we might need to do an autism assessment here." And yeah, that sort of has been literally in the last couple of months. And that's really, so I haven't finished, gone through the assessment yet, but I'm pretty much self-identifying as autistic through speaking to the psychologist and doing, the preliminary assessment. So yeah, there's I've been on this sort of 2 years of messiness and acceptance and all of the things which I'm sure we'll get into, only to have it all come up again and have another go, another wave to ride. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So what made you choose a neurodiversity affirming therapist? Was there...
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. It's a bit hard to say from our context here because, realistically, I'm aware of our privilege and how fortunate we are in Australia to have such an amazing health system that's pretty much accessible and affordable for most people. I know that's not true for most of the world. But I have been let down by the medical system over the years, looking back now, knowing what I know, what I've presented to doctors, GPs, to therapists, to psychologists. It wouldn't have been hard to join the dots, but it never was. And so I sort of had experiences of, oh, you're the most self-aware client I've seen, and you know the tools, you just need to do them. It's like, I think I came here saying it's hard to do the things, but so yeah.
I literally had that conversation earlier today.
Yeah. So
you're so self-aware.
it's not, and I think I can't remember, one of the scientific gurus of ADHD says, this is not a problem about understanding or knowledge. It's about engagement and doing. And so that, and so I'd never really had very successful psychological interventions. I have at times suffered from depression, and I've had some strategies that psychologists have given me to help me out of the sort of depths of that, I suppose, but no real dealing with the underlying stuff. And so then, sorry, to get back to your original question, why did I go for a neuroaffirming psychologist? Well, since my diagnosis, probably the biggest challenge has been the acceptance of the ADHD, and to let go of the masking and the people pleasing. And I went through a period of coaching, which was very helpful. But through that, we sort of identified that I was really just so resistant to feeling any negative emotions, was very protective. I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt that I was struggling to deal with. And yeah, so there was a fair bit going on there that probably needed some good therapy. But I had that previous experience of therapy in some ways being more negative in just, making me feel that I'm wrong or broken or can't do things and all that sort of thing. So that's why I sought out someone who, could see me and not do that, not say, yeah, just do this. And so, and it's been fantastic. So, I would, I think it's really important to sort of trust yourself in that process. And if it doesn't feel right, then you can change. So this is my second therapist with ADHD. The first one, it just didn't click. And so, so I pulled the pin on that and started all over again. So that's.
Yeah. You mentioned people pleasing as a mask. Would you be willing to maybe share a story or just a little background on that?
I mean, it's been my way of life. One of the first most confronting things I realized after my diagnosis, and even a bit beforehand, probably into the lead up of me seeking some help, I realized that pretty much every decision I made every day, all of the time, was determined by how it would be perceived by others, or what I had to do to satisfy the needs of others, or what I thought other people wanted in that situation. So I would have described it as my way of being. Very much in unpacking it, I would say it's a protective measure. I think there's also some inclination towards it in personality as well, but it was just a way of being. So all I can really say is that it just determined everything. And there's also obviously some underlying things in there. If that's the way you are, you're not placing any worth on yourself. Everything that other people, what you perceive from other people, you give more importance to, and so on. So then you're very susceptible to all of that, of course. And I don't think I can separate the people pleasing from the. I can only describe it as self-loathing. Just the negative impression of myself. It is improving, but it has been horrific for most of my life. And so you think you're wrong, you're bad, sort of shame and guilt riddled, and then you just try and hide that from everyone and protect yourself by making everyone happy and presenting a face, I suppose, is how I've sort of seen it. That's how I would probably simplify the story now.
Yeah. Wow, so aware.
Yeah, thanks. No, you got that away. Yeah. Thanks, Toni. Good job.
I have a bigger question, but it just reminds me of I was in a therapy session once with this guy, and I'd already been through all of the CBT and everything else. And at this time, I didn't know I was neurodiverse just yet, but I was saying things just as they were, right? Like, this is what I actually think. This is why I'm actually doing this, blah, 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 help. And it had no help. There was nothing he could do. He's like, why are you saying that? I'm like, holy shit, come on, we can do this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Upping him up.
Like, do you want me to do your job for you? I've just told you what I need. Yeah.
This might need to, and this might be the first time you've thought about this question. But with autism, there tends to be like a misreading of neurotypical people. Um, and so if that's true for you, when you look back to the people pleasing, what was it like to um, figure out what people wanted in order to do that? Were there times that you misread the situation?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's interesting. I'm only starting to become aware of that. It's as you know, as you start to accept your neurotype, you start to then, I don't know that I've had any choice. Just things from my past start to replay, and things start to fall into place, I suppose. And yeah, I've realized I wasn't as good as at reading the room as I thought I was. And I suppose the way that I experience that now is one of my most common things that comes into my head is I don't understand the question, or I don't understand what you're asking of me, or those sorts of things. There's more confusion at the situation now, in that I'm actually possibly just seeing it, the situation as it is, or seeing it from maybe my true self rather than the masking self. And so, um, so I don't know that I saw in the moment in the past that I was not reading it well. I thought I was right, and um, things often didn't turn out well, and I would not understand, and I would probably, to be honest, internalize that and say I'm the thing that's wrong in this situation, or and generally, it's a not sure where it lands on the ADHD or autism side or whatever, but I've had a career. I'm in a position now in my career where I'm just about to hit 3 years, and that's the longest I've ever been in a job in my life. And and so the situation generally gets to a point where I think either I'm about to get found out as a fake or whatever, or I can just, enough things have gone wrong that it's like I've got to pull the ripcord and get out of here. So obviously, yeah, I wasn't as good at the reading the room and people pleasing as much as I thought I was. I mean, I think people pleasing in a way, um, you can be successful for a short period of time, but over time, you know, it's not coming from a genuine place. You can't really build a connection through it. It's not real. It's just trying to work it out and give. It's not genuine. And so it can't really be sustained over time. It's been my experience, even if you were really good at it. So,
Yeah, yeah. And the same thing that the people pleasing seemed to be there for, what it was to hide this self-loathing, but it was also an experience of self-rejection. And so just like a tap that's on all the time, filling the sink.
yeah.
Yeah, with more and more.
And the
I
other the other thing about it is it's really tiring, right?
yeah.
And I've learned this has really clicked into place after the autism awareness, is that it's so tiring. I did not realize that people, when they said they were tired, that they just meant they were a bit tired. They didn't mean that every part of their body hurt and they could hardly move through exhaustion, because that's what I felt all the time, so tense in all my muscles and so tired. But just thinking that, oh, everyone else can do it, I'll just keep going, sort of thing. Like, it's really tiring trying to read everything and be at sort of on awareness that you might get found out at any moment, and you've got to be hyper vigilant and all of that sort of thing. And also having all of the sensory stuff that you're not filtering. It's a lot, and it's exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For someone that maybe hasn't unmasked or even is listening and isn't neurodiverse, um, how would you now explain the difference between regular I'm tired and the full body I'm tired that you experienced?
Wow. Oh, that's a good question. It's, I hope this isn't culturally an Australian thing, but
And if it is, it's you. It's good.
I just think, I mean, maybe as a, well, I'm not sure that the world's moved past this, but in my 20s, going to university, which was obviously protracted because of my neurotype, we partied a lot, and you go out for an all-nighter, and might get a couple of hours sleep, and you wake up in the morning and you're hungover and you've had no sleep and food and all that sort of thing, and you just feel it just hurts. Although I don't get sort of like the headaches of the hangover, but the rest of my body feels pretty much like, the worst hangover from your big drinking session, I suppose, is for the exhaustion. It's just that my muscles are so tight and tense, and I'm in that sort of fight or flight phase for the majority of the time. Um, while you're there, you're sort of up and you're going. But if there's any relief from that, there's just it just feels like a full body exhaustion, like a depletion, rather than I'm just a bit late on my sleep and I've been working a bit hard. They're really different things, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the I'm just a bit tired. I've been working too hard. Feel like today or feel like now in your life?
Oh, it's interesting. Um, how does that feel like for me now? Yeah, I think it's a bit normal. Like, if it depends what stage I'm at. I haven't I'm nowhere. I'm very much in the messiness. So there's some good days and some really not so good days. But if I'm in a pretty good place with no burnout or anything like that around, tiredness literally is just like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit lethargic and a bit yawny. I should go to bed, you know. Whereas that's not what it was. It was like, not that I ever felt I could go to bed to get rid of this exhaustion, because it wasn't really about so much sleep. It was about the tension and the sort of vigilance, I suppose. So sleep never really did it. Um,
Yeah. I'm almost sensing like sleep would at least be a break.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But that is not, as sort of regenerating as it should be, really. Not when you wake up and you're
Yeah.
still pretty much on alarm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hadn't like thought of this question for myself. And I think the way regular tired feels for me now is actually it feels good,
Yeah.
right? Like I've always had trouble with sleep and things like that. I have a lot of shame spirals that, I've untangled and all those things, and I'm sure there's more to do. Um, but the last couple of years when I have actually like, whew, wow, I did a lot in the yard, or my body is actually tired. Like
Yeah.
I'm proud of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that moment, you've actually relaxed to some degree, which has been a bit of a foreign concept to me. Like, it's like, wow, I can feel this tiredness and act on it. That's not a thing that I could do in the past. It was, yeah,
Yeah.
I
And not
know.
feel bad about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a pretty typical phrase to me, which is, well, everybody else seems like they can do it,
Mm.
right? Okay, they're doing it. Come on, come on, come on.
Yeah. The thing that sorry, the thing that I found in my post-diagnosis is that there were a few things. There was the initial, probably just a bit of a grief in terms of the life that I've lost, sort of thing, because I turned 50 last year, so I'm well and truly advanced in the years thing, and I feel like, I imagine what I could have been, that sort of
Yeah.
grief thing. But the other one that you sort of got triggered a little bit then was, I was angry, right? Because I didn't realize that the things that I found so hard to do that everyone else just found easy relatively. And that their version of tired was not my version of tired, and their version of, you know, procrastination or not feeling motivated was not what I experienced. And I was just like, so how can you judge me? You know, and, you know, how can you think you're better than me? Because for me to even compete on the same level as you guys, I'm starting from a million miles behind, you know. And so that I was really angry at that sort of thing when I first got diagnosed. I've sort of taken it as a bit of a challenge now, but it's yeah, that not understanding that what I was experienced is not experienced by most people. It was a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and some people take it so far as to even try to empathize or help by saying, "Oh, everybody's a little neurodivergent," and that's after, you know, you find out that you're different. It's like, okay,
Deep breath.
yeah, yeah. I'm having a hard time not comparing it to a lot of the racism that happens here in the United States, right? Like you talked about, well, hey, I started back here, right? And sometimes just where someone is born in a socioeconomic status or where they went to school or the color of their skin. Um, and I, it's like the same anger or similar, at least, metaphor,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been a real eye opener for me, because essentially the way I've presented to the world is a straight white privileged male, you know, in Australia,
Yeah.
which is, you know, you don't get many more privileged places without, you know, we're like, you know, we're like the rest of the Western world, except there's no consequences to what we do because we're so little, we can just do whatever we want. So it's like, you know, we're so privileged here, it's insane. But, you know, now understanding, you know, having had this experience of going, it's actually been really, really difficult. Um, Imagine if I didn't have all of that privilege. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the best placed person, and, you know, even now, I'm a bit like, oh, I feel really awful that I can actually have the capacity to deal with all of this, um, because there's so many people in Australia, in the States, or let alone the rest of the world, that don't have this opportunity to deal with these things. So yeah, that whole intersectionality is,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I can see my privilege in that, and yeah, it's a big thing. It's bred for me a bit of understanding of, as you say, you can see, I've got a bit of a lived experience of that anger of
Yeah.
starting behind, but I also am aware that it's, you know, tiny compared to what a lot of people experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And uh, I have been angry and bitter for an easy 20 years of my life, right? And so, um, yeah, anger and resentment are one of those emotions that are pretty near and dear to my heart. And so terrifying for most people. Um, yeah. Oh, well, shoot, I think you froze. Take this opportunity to switch feet that I'm
Oh,
sitting
I
on.
can still hear you.
Oh, good, good. Um,
Ah, that's funny that you say that you're sitting on your feet. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm standing and I can move. So it's like
I
neither of us
really
are
probably
kidding.
should. That would feel good. No, I don't want
Do what you
to.
want. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, so my experience of that one recently has been quite funny in that it's a bit like that, you know, the my people pleasing and all of that would mean that I would never have any outward expression of my neurodiversity. You know, I would do everything I could to hide it.
yeah,
But now and this is not, you know, big noting myself or anything. It's not courageous. It's just I don't, with now that I am starting to unmask, I often find that I don't have the choice not to. Um, and I've found now that I actually, you know, I've got one in my hand now. I have a squeegee ball. I stim a lot with these squeegee ball things, and they're really good for me. And I found that not been aware that I'm taking them out into public now, which is a really different thing. And so I'll be in public, down at the park walking the dog or whatever, and I'll have this thing squeezing in my hand. And I sometimes I'm aware of it and I just go, whatever, and sometimes not. But it's really interesting. Some people get agitated. Like they're like, what are you doing that for?
Yeah.
That's weird, sort of thing. They don't say it, but you can see they're just like, "Argh." And now that sort of anger bit in me is like, stuff you. You don't, I can do what I want with this. This is the least of the things. If you're offended by this, mate, and so
What's
like,
wrong with you?
well, and probably the thing is, yeah. So anyway, I've noticed that just a little bit more being me, then you can sometimes get a bit of anger back. But in a way, I'm sort of like, you've got no idea what the anger and resentment we've lived with for so long. So I'm sort of comfortable with that being in the space. I'm not recoiling from it like I used to.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to talk with people about like different parts or feelings or aspects of themselves. So like a part of me feels this and a part of me, actually believes or feels that. Um, Thinking about that situation in the park, right? Where you can just feel someone doing that. Um, if this is true for you, which I believe it is, the parts of you that held that self-loathing for such a long time, they're still with you, but they're with you differently. And now you're making choices to be with them differently. Are you with me so far, since I know you're not an IFS person?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. So all that's to ask, I'm really curious how those parts that held the self-loathing felt when you were able to look at the judgy eyes and be like, stuff you.
Yeah. Their first thing is, hey, what about me? What about me? Remember, you hate yourself. You can't do this.
Okay, yeah. That's
Like,
awesome.
there really is. There's still a bit of that of going, no, I don't think you've got me nailed, mate. It's
Yeah,
and um but I think the power of that is much less than it used to be. Because I can see it, I suppose, when it's unexpressed and it's not known for what it is and what's driving it. It has extreme power. It's just this big, scary, dark thing, right? But now I can see that, that's what it is. It just sort of reinforces it for me. It's like, yeah, you're part of the system. The whole system works for you. This world was built
yeah,
for you. And generally it is a middle-aged straight white male that's doing it. It's like the whole system was built for you, mate. Of course, any little difference is you're just going to go, don't like that because, this is how it all works for me. Um, and so in a way, it sort of says, that just sort of reinforces the story to some degree that I've built the sort of my relationship with that of going, yeah, but I'm not you. It's not built for me. I can be me and build my own world. And you're very unlikely to be a part of that. And what you think of me doesn't really matter. So I think that's the story that slowly emerges. But
yeah.
it's normally one step forward, two steps back, and
Sure,
and probably
yeah.
walking away, I'm walking up the hill going, oh God, I hate that guy, did I say the wrong
I
thing?
gave him a dirty look. You knew.
Exactly. Did I say the wrong thing? But I'm, as I said, it's starting very slowly to be a bit unconscious. It's a bit like, well, I think the value that I had placed on others' opinion of me was definitely based on that. I'm broken, I'm wrong, I'm bad, I can't do this thing. But now I know that I'm not broken, I'm just different. And the thing that I meant to do wasn't built for me, it was built for them. Then, it sort of says, it doesn't, well, of course they're going to have strong opinions. It's all built for them. That's great. They can't understand why someone would feel it hard or find it hard. If they do, then awesome, good on them,
Yeah.
well done. But if they don't, it's a bit like, well, yeah, that just sort of, supports the story, I suppose, and that's where they are, and this is where I am, and so be it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like parts that held the shame, they're a little worried about like being kicked out, right? Or not having a job sort of thing. So they're reminding you like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
But there's also a little less energy there. So there's a little more space for that anger. And that energy of anger tends to fuel us forward,
Yeah.
right? Just this week, I channeled this anger from a sense of rejection into something really amazing, right? And you'll see later.
Yeah.
Everybody will see later. um, but the relationship between all of it already seems to be shifting, and it seems to me that as you build, hey, I'm going to build a world that's made for me, um, they'll all be in that world differently. They won't even need to look at, I'm picturing this like runner with like perfect hair and a tan and like some stupid designer shorts that
Oh my God. Yep. It's interesting, right? It's telling that the example I had was, a discussion around the dog park, because it's really, really low consequence, and it's pretty structured, um, the bounds of conversation there are pretty limited. No one's going to go on a deep dive or those sorts of things. Um, so, yeah, I don't want to put any perception out there that I've got it all sorted. I'm well and truly in the messy bit because that's what I can see, right? And I can see that that's a possibility, and I'm trying it on and getting a bit of experience to it. But I've also got a job because I have financial commitments. I've got a wife, I've got a child. Um, and that building of your world, is easier in some places than the others. um, and and so, yeah, sure, that's an example of, the underlying how I want it to be. But it gets really hard, particularly the late diagnosis bit makes it really, really hard because, yeah, for any number of reasons. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned that a lot of the masking that you did really made it hard to connect to other people. Um, yeah, and as you uh, think about your family, think about this unmasking process, um, who who have you felt a connection with or gotten closer to in the last few months?
Yeah. Hmm. Um, so my gut says no one. I've just got to now
Yeah.
do the filter on that. Um,
Hi, gut.
yeah. And that's the thing, the first thing that came up, my response is no one. Is that true? Um, yeah, look, it probably is. It's hard, hey. um, it's hard in a few ways in that, haven't necessarily gotten closer, but I've become more genuine. And so an example of that would be, the classic family Christmas, all the
Oh,
tension
yeah.
before,
Interesting.
expectations and everything that's going to happen on what happens on the family Christmas. And my parents live a couple of hours away, down by the beach, and Christmas was to be at their house. And the expectation was that we'd pack up with my family and the dog and everyone and go down there 2 or 3 nights beforehand, stay in a small house with 6 people and 3 dogs and all of that, for 3 or 4 nights. Yeah, exactly. And in the past, we've just gone, yeah, sure, this is awesome. Let's do it. That's what we do as a family. This is what families are.
I
And and then wonder why I'm a complete to be around because I can't cope. But anyway, but this time I was speaking to my mum about Christmas, and I said, look, to be honest, I think I'm only going to have enough energy to be able to come down on Christmas morning and stay one night. And so, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and I just have to stick to my guns and say, it's sorry if that's not what you're after, but I really think that's the only way I can do it, or something like that. And there's no judgment. There's probably disappointment and probably a bit of lack of understanding because I don't give all of the context. But from my side, that's the first steps to being a bit more genuine and being a bit closer to myself and building a relationship based on that more so than the noise and performance and everything of people pleasing. So I wouldn't have said that I've necessarily gotten closer to anyone, but I am being more genuine in most interactions where I feel safe to, and that circle is expanding. And yeah, so I wouldn't have said I've brought any new people in or anyone outside of my immediate family I wouldn't have gotten necessarily closer to. But the level of conversation and that I share with my wife and my son now is pretty different than it was a couple of years ago. We talk about the heavy stuff and we're closer for it. There's plenty of challenges in that, but we are definitely closer for it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Before we go into that, it must have been really terrifying to put a boundary out there, like Christmas. I'm only staying one day instead of 4. And you
It's
are frozen. I
interesting.
can sort of
Stress
hear
before
you.
that. Oh, am I?
Yeah, you're back now.
I can hear you. Oh, it
Excellent.
does say my internet connection is unstable. It's telling me. Hopefully you can hear me enough.
Yeah,
Um,
you're back.
I wasn't in the past. If there was a difficult conversation like that, I wouldn't have been aware of where I sat and what I needed. I think that's probably the difference. And so when there's that uncertainty, and I'm realizing this is a real autistic thing, uncertainty ain't good, that I would just get super stressed and I would be difficult to be around. I would push into that high stress mode and, you know, blame and all these sorts of things and be overreact and all those sorts of things. And that probably would have been the case in the days leading up to a conversation like that. This one wasn't like that. I think there is that difference of I was coming from a place. So I think the biggest thing that's happened is that with my ADHD diagnosis and then you know,
I'm going to turn my camera off for a moment so that
and
maybe we
therapy
have
and
a
stuff
little
like
more.
that, I might try and do the
I think
same.
back. Yeah. Okay.
Um, I sorry, lost my train of thought. Who would have thought? So the ADHD therapy and so on, and the medication and everything, sort of made me feel a bit more normal.
Mhm.
And the aim sort of might have been a little bit to fit in a bit more or be a bit more productive or whatever. And it took me a while to realize that actually, no, I need to accept myself and sort of rather than try and fit into the world, which is what I've been trying to do forever, not very successfully, I should, be more of me. The thing that I've found out since the autism is that I was pretty much in a state of burnout all of the time.
Yeah.
And that made me a really difficult person to be around, right? I'd fly off the handle, or I'd just be stressed or irrational, or just leave, or whatever. My coping strategies were pretty poor.
Mm.
And knowing that now, and knowing a bit more of some of the simple things that I can do to keep me out of that state, I'm able to sort of use the people pleasing against myself a little bit and say, this isn't only just for you, mate. This isn't a selfish thing that you're doing so you feel good about yourself. This will make you a better person for everyone. Um, and so rather than being a really angry, uptight, withdrawn, whatever person
Yeah.
for 3 days with my family, I decided it's better to have one day of real quality. And so that's sort of how I'm approaching it a bit now.
That's amazing. That is really amazing. So amazing. And since I can't see you, I can more easily distracted. Then I forgot my question, but it was a really good question. No, I got it back. I got it back. I'm gonna try bring my camera back. We'll
Yeah,
see if we get to. Thanks. It was amazing how different it felt. Like
I know.
uh, I recognize myself like still like smiling and nodding and all of that, but there was this like emptiness and I kept
Yeah.
looking at my desk anyway. Um sticking with the topic of connection and this might seem like a weird question, but it comes from a place of any type of change is hard for people. And so even when uh someone is quote easier to be around, it can be very disconcerting, right? So has there been anything like that where it's not just I don't like your boundaries, it's whatever she's experiencing or your son is experiencing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I sort of see it as there's always some friction or resistance to change, no matter what. It's yeah, it's been a process, absolutely. Um, so when met my wife 20 years ago, um, I was in full masking mode. You know, I was a successful consultant, life of the party, alcohol fueled most of the time, you know, all of that sort of thing. And that's how we met and bonded. And, you know, it was only a month or so ago that she was like, we've got these uh, friends who, a couple, and they keep joking that um, what they've got now is not what they signed up for. It wasn't on the label when they bought in, just as a bit of a joke. Um, and she was like, "That's actually pretty much the truth." Is that what she's got now is very different. And yeah, we've discussed a little bit that obviously relationships and people don't stay static, but this is a different magnitude of that. And so I think it's interesting, like when you have that discussion, when you know, my wife did say to me, you know, I've just got to express you're really not what you presented to me when we got together, and the reasons why she fell in love with me might
Mm,
not exist anymore. You know, and so I think the first thing that happened, rather than just her trying to understand things or just feeling the friction of the change or you know the consequences of it, it was a point where she recognized that this is really different to what it was, and that she wanted to express that. um, and to be honest, that process has been in many ways a positive one. Just putting it out there, I think we're finding that a lot of the time talking about it, getting it out there and being explicit takes a bit of the fear away of it and the power. And so we can now have that discussion that she can say, what do you need? Because she doesn't feel like it's um, I'm just needing things for myself, because we've spoken through that whole process of I'm trying to be the best version of myself through self-management. And so if I'm being really, really difficult, or if I'm asking for something which I don't always do well, because, there is all that self-loathing, all of that. Sometimes you sort of force it in or whatever, or at worst manipulate to get it or whatever. She might now pull back a bit and say, so what do you actually need right now? And so, yeah, I think, it's messy. There's uncertainty, and it's an ongoing discussion, but it being open and being an actual discussion, I think, means that it's all done from a good place, and there's no big scary thing that isn't expressed. It's more, this is just tough. It's big and it's tough and it's a lot, and we need to support each other in that. And so, if that means that she really wants us to go to a social thing where she would really like me to be, although I might find it a bit uncomfortable, sometimes I'll just have to go, is this really important to you? And I'll try and do that. And I'll try not to mask, and I'll try and do everything I can around it to be in a good place for it. And then she'll do the same. She'll be like, I can see you struggle. I had a pretty rough one yesterday. And she's like, what do you need? And even though she was super tired or whatever, she said, just go for your walk, go down to the creek, sit at the water, do your thing. And so there's a bit more of that now. But yeah, I think it's quite surprising. I'm rarely this positive. It's been a tough slog. And when I was trying for what I thought was self-care, but finding it so hard because, it is, it's just hard to do the things, and the frustration with that. And I'd often take that out on others, or I would, be too forceful or those sorts of things. And yeah, it's just really hard to sort of self-advocate, and within yourself first, to think firstly that you're worthy of it, but then to also push it in a nice way. And it's hard. Hey, there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of clunkiness, and yeah, it doesn't always land well, or it's definitely not always delivered well. So yeah.
Yeah. What is it like knowing that there's a risk of hearing no to asking for what you really need?
Do your worst. I've done worse than that my whole bloody life.
Wow.
Literally. I mean, seriously. You can't, and I think that's a part of that whole defense mechanism, the self-loathing. It's like, I can hurt me more than you can, So, yeah, no, in that context, it's a bit like, yeah, fair enough. I've not asked for any of this forever, and I've sort of sorted out in really unproductive, unhelpful ways in the past. I've got no expectation that it's all going to slot into place. And I don't even really trust myself that I'm always asking for the right thing either. But yeah, no, to be honest, I'm who knows whether that's coming from a positive place or a lack of self-worth place, but I'm just appreciative if it ever comes off. So, and to be honest, there is some pride in just the asking, to be honest, in the first bit of knowing and the asking. Like, if my mum blew up and cracked it and said, you've got to come down, I probably would have come down, whatever. I still tried. And that's a big thing for me to have done. Yeah. So, and there's lots of those things to be done all the time. And ideally, the circle that they inhabit pushes out and out, but it's pretty tight at the moment. But yeah.
Yeah. Would it be okay if I offered an interpretation?
Sure, go. Yeah.
Yeah, you said go ahead, do your worst, or I'm going to do worse to me. It actually sounds like those parts that maybe hold that self-loathing are protecting you, right? Like
Mm.
by holding up that armor for you, you have the space to ask for what you need and not like collapse if there's a no. Um, and that seems like a really big, important job to have.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like it's different to what it did in the past, in that it
Yeah.
just sort of kept me down and, reinforced that what everyone else says is more important and all of that. But now it's like, no, it's all right. They can't hurt you as much as I can. You can ask. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I've never thought of it like that. And I think those stories seem to matter, like the way that I process and things land. Like, obviously I've got no memory whatsoever. So someone tells me to do a list of 7 things and it's gone. But the story of that is cool. That sits now. Like that, you know, that will be something I will take with me. Absolutely.
Yay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And for our last question, since autism does tend to run in families, do you see bits of yourself in your son, and what does that do for you?
Both ways I see it. So my father is a bit more of a classical autistic, at the forefront of the computer data world in the 60s, like a classic. But
Can I
yeah.
make a joke?
Hmm?
Can I make a joke?
Go for it,
Your
please.
dad was cray cray because of the cray computer, and maybe it doesn't land because you're in Australia.
No.
Uh, cray,
Yeah.
I guess maybe 10 years ago was
Yeah, no,
the
I
thing
got
that
cray
I'd be
cray.
like, you're crazy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's a computer.
yeah.
I'm not editing that out.
Don't, don't,
I'm
don't.
not.
I'm glad you went there. Yeah. So yeah, look, really interesting time, right? So time blindness, when earlier this week we had an appointment with my son and the pediatrician, to get the feedback from the forms for a preliminary ADHD assessment. So we'd gotten to the point where we thought something had to happen. I'd been seeing things for a couple of years, mainly around attention and emotional dysregulation. And it took me so long to come to terms with that, to not just be filled with guilt that I've given in this thing that's taken you know, made my life so hard and meant that I've missed out on so much. And now he has to deal with it and all of that sort of thing. Um, Over time, I've been able to shift that to, because I've got this voice in my head of, if only someone told me this when I was 12, if only I knew how my brain worked then, it would have been so much easier. And there's a few points in childhood that I can pin where it was like, oh no, you can't be that. You can't put that out there. That's dangerous. And so if I'd known, if they were different, life would have been really different. And so seeing that, I thought, well, I'm left with nothing. If I do nothing other than just make sure that he has that opportunity, then that's great. Um, the other thing that it also does for me is that I know that kids don't listen to what they're told, they learn from what they see. So it doesn't matter how much they say, be yourself, mate, or whatever. In his head, he's probably sitting there going, yeah, but you're not. And so I've got essentially no choice but to role model the unmasking process, in a way. So yeah, so that's sort of, it was hard, hey, particularly when I was going through that grief and sort of anger phase. Yeah, it was really hard to see that, like, particularly around sport, like and that, what do they say with ADHD, the metacognition, we've got no idea that we're crap at something. He couldn't concentrate, and was just really poor at a few things, and we'd get hit in the back of the head by the ball or sort of thing because he wasn't concentrating, and then come off and say, "Oh, I was awesome, I was the best player." It's like, oh, and so it was really hard to do all that sort of stuff. But anyway, we had a big move away. We were living rurally and moved to the city last year, and the emotional dysregulation and anxiety built up, so it became hard. So we went and did something about it. Anyway, the first meeting with the pediatrician was really, he was like, "Oh yeah, no, this looks like a thing, he seems to have really strict rules, really perfectionist and all these sorts of things." He wondered whether it was ADHD plus something else, all that sort of thing. But yeah, the meeting this week went a little bit differently than we expected. We walked in and he said, "Oh, well, the teachers' survey said that there's nothing there, and so I've got a conflicting thing going on here." And so he thinks it's probably more anxiety than that, but he's open to, I'm not bagging him out or anything, but, it's just that classical thing of listening to the teachers rather than the parents and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so it's been a little bit confronting. But he's going through therapy, going to a psychologist who, at this stage, we think is really good with that, and we'll probably go through more in-depth assessment. But yeah, I suppose it's just a example of that. We're still going to have to advocate really strongly. My wife, on reflection after a few days, thought, actually, I don't think the pediatrician got it right. There's some conflicting stuff in what they were saying, and we'll just have to keep going with this. But yeah, so there's some sort of neurodiversity there. As I said, I think the thing that I can do is be open and honest about my neurotype and how that plays out and how that's been difficult for me, but I'm trying to find a way. Yeah, sorry, big rambling thing going on here. Who would have thought?
No, you're doing great.
One of the most beautiful things he said at some point, like when we first, the way we started discussing it was, there's a Venn diagram of ADHD, autism, and I think it was giftedness or something like that. Yeah, and there's lots of those words. And we just had it. I just printed it out, and it was just sitting on the dining room table, and he'd just point at one at dinner and just go, "Oh yeah, that's what I feel," and those sorts. And so it was a really good way for us to have this discussion, and it was really amazing. And then he was having a bit of trouble at school and not quite fitting in and all those sorts of things. And I said to him, "Mate, do you feel a bit different?" He said, "Yeah, I'm different." I said, "How do you feel about that?" He said, "Oh no, I'm happy to be different. I just don't want it to be hard." And I just melted, I was just like, wow. And it was like, so, he's although he masks at school, we know that he's not the same kid, and it's a new school in the city. So he's, there's some, it's hard to fit into an existing school and all that. He's trying to just fit in. We get all that, but he doesn't seem to have gone full, "It's all about me, I'm wrong, I'm broken, I've got to do something," that sort of thing. So I think it's the right time, not late, and hopefully we can create a world for him. And we're much better now at considering his neurotype, of what we understand of it, in the way that we operate as a family and set up the life and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, in terms of how it's been, it's really, really challenging. Some wins, some losses, but overall, it's been really positive, and we know we're going to have to keep pushing, and we're going to have to trust ourselves and back ourselves to get where we need to be. But we're pretty confident we can do that.
Yeah. And it really seems that as you unmask and really untangle all of this, that you'll be able to give to him the things that you needed at whatever age he is along the way. That's amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. And sometimes it's just the space to just be whatever you are, with no consequence or no judgment or whatever, and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, anyway, it's also a really different world, right? I grew up in the 80s. is a really different time. So
Yeah. And it's not just the neon colors and like the pointy sunglasses.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So how was this podcast for you? How are you feeling right now? I want to make sure that I don't talk your ear off all night.
No, I love this stuff. I love talking. Yeah, it's great. Like, I love this. I worry that I've been a bit rambly and all of that sort of thing that as we do, but I just I get a lot out of doing this in terms of articulating how I feel, and it's often nice to step back a little bit and explain your story a little bit because you get an insight that you might not have seen. So it's really great for me, but I really do hope that just normalizing this for everyone. So, if we can break down a little bit of that stigma, build people's confidence a little bit in that they're not broken, that, yeah, it's really hard. Yeah, it's really scary. Not diminishing that at all. That's the truth. But the costs of not pushing through, of continuing to mask, is so high, that, I've gotten to the point now where I don't have any choice, but um, it's worth it, I suppose. It's hard, particularly if you're late diagnosed, all of that sort of thing. But I just hope that people can see that it's worth it. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's been worth it for me as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.